The night my husband told me to get out, it was raining. Not a dramatic storm, just that cold, steady November rain that soaks through everything. Your jacket, your shoes, your ability to believe things will be okay. I was holding my daughter against my chest, her face pressed into my neck, and I stood on the front porch of the house I'd helped pay for, watching the deadbolt turn from the inside. I thought this was the end of everything I knew. I should back up. My name is Hannah. I was 26 when I married Owen. I know how that sounds now. Too young, too fast. But at the time, it felt like the most certain thing I'd ever done. Owen was charming in that quiet way. The kind of man who remembers how you take your coffee and holds the door open without thinking about it. My mother adored him. My father called him a solid guy. And I was in love? Or at least I thought I understood what love was at 26. We got pregnant 8 months after the wedding. I won't pretend it was planned, but I also won't pretend I wasn't happy. The moment I saw those two lines, something shifted in me. A kind of fierce, bone-deep certainty that I was going to love this child more than anything. I named her Rose before she was even born. Owen seemed happy too. He painted the nursery himself. This soft yellow color I picked out. He put together the crib 3 times because he kept reading the instructions wrong and didn't want it to be unsafe. I thought I knew him. The cracks started when Rose was about 4 months old. Looking back, I can trace them now. The way he started coming home later. The way his phone was always face down. The way he'd go quiet when I talked about our finances. At the time, I told myself he was stressed. New baby, new expenses. We'd both been sleeping maybe 4 hours a night. I made excuses because I didn't want to see what was right in front of me. One evening, I asked him directly. Rose was finally asleep. I'd made dinner, actual dinner, not just something microwaved, and I sat across from him at the table and said, "Are we okay?" He didn't answer right away. He cut his chicken, chewed. Then he said, "I don't think I want this anymore." I thought he meant the marriage. It was worse than that. He meant all of it. Me, the baby, the yellow nursery, the life we built. He said he'd met someone at work. He said it had been going on for almost a year. He said, and this is the part I still can't fully wrap my head around. He said he wanted to start fresh. Like Rose and I were a rough draft he could just throw away. I asked him to leave. He said no, it was his name on the lease. I called my parents that same night, standing in the bathroom with the shower running so Rose wouldn't hear me cry. My mother picked up. I told her everything in about 45 seconds, voice shaking, mascara everywhere. There was a pause on the other end. And then she said, "Hannah, I think you need to figure this out on your own." I thought I'd misheard her. I hadn't. My parents had always been complicated. My father ran a landscaping business, my mother managed the books, and they'd spent 30 years building something together that looked solid from the outside but ran mostly on stubbornness and pride. They'd never entirely approved of me, though I couldn't always name why. I got good grades, stayed out of trouble, put myself through 2 years of community college before transferring. But there was always this sense that I was one wrong step away from disappointing them in some final, irreversible way. Getting left with a baby, apparently, was that step. My mother said they couldn't take on more stress right now. My father didn't get on the phone at all. I stood in that bathroom for another 10 minutes after I hung up. The shower's still running, Rose starting to fuss in the other room, and I felt something go very still inside me. Not calm, just empty in the way a house feels empty after a fire. Owen gave me 2 weeks. I spent those 2 weeks doing everything I could think of. I called a legal aid hotline about child support. The woman on the phone was kind, walked me through the paperwork, told me to file immediately. I filed, but Owen had already quit his job at the company where he'd met her, and the new position was under a contractor arrangement that made wage garnishment nearly impossible to process quickly. The caseworker told me it could take months, maybe longer. I asked what I was supposed to do until then. She didn't have an answer. I called 2 different shelters. The first had a 6-week wait list. The second had space, but it was a shared room situation, with no storage, no way to safely keep Rose's medications. She had a minor respiratory thing, nothing serious. But she needed a specific humidity in her nebulizer. And the intake coordinator, as kindly as she could, told me it might not be the right environment for an infant. I understood. I didn't blame her. But I stood in a CVS parking lot after that call with Rose in her car seat and a diaper back on my shoulder, and I thought, there is nowhere for us to go. I had $600 in a checking account that was technically joint, which meant Owen could see every withdrawal. I took it all out in cash the next morning. The night he changed the locks, I hadn't expected it. I thought I had 2 more days. I came back from a laundromat run, Rose in the stroller, her clean clothes in a bag, my whole chest hurting from carrying everything down 4 flights because the elevator was broken again and my key didn't work. He didn't answer the door. His girlfriend's car was in the parking spot that used to be mine. I sat on the steps for a while. Rose fell asleep on my lap. The rain started around 9. I want to be honest about what the next few weeks were actually like, because I've seen the way people talk about homelessness, like it's this cinematic thing, like there's dignity in the suffering if you just frame it right. There wasn't. It was just cold and exhausting and humiliating in small, grinding ways. I slept in my car for the first 4 nights, parked in a church lot that had a sign saying they welcomed people in need. Nobody bothered us. I was grateful for that in a way I'd never been grateful for anything. After the car, I found out about a spot under the Route 9 overpass where a few other people had set up. I know how that sounds. I know, but one of the women there, an older lady named, well, I just called her Miss June, had a little propane heater and she shared it without being asked. She'd been living outside for almost 2 years. She knew which dumpsters behind which restaurants were unlocked on which nights. She knew which gas stations had bathrooms that weren't locked. She helped me figure out how to keep Rose warm, how to time the feeding so I wasn't heating bottles in the cold, which churches gave out food on which mornings. I called the WIC office from a borrowed phone. They got us enrolled within a week. Formula, some basics, it helped. It wasn't enough, but it helped. I want to say I was strong during this time. I want to say I held it together beautifully. Some days I did. Some days I sat in a fast food restaurant for 3 hours because it was warm and they didn't ask me to leave, and I just stared at my daughter sleeping in her carrier and thought, I did everything right. I did everything I was supposed to do. How did I end up here? It was on one of those days, a Tuesday in February, Rose was 7 months old, that a man sat down across from me. I almost got up and left. A stranger sitting across from you when you're a woman alone with a baby, you learn to be careful. But something about him made me hesitate. He was older, maybe late 60s, well-dressed in that understated way. Good coat, nothing flashy. He put his hands flat on the table, palms down, like he was trying to show me he wasn't a threat. He said, are you Hannah Caldwell? Hannah Marie Caldwell, born June 4th, 1997, in Raleigh, North Carolina? I felt ice go through me. Who are you? He said his name was Franklin. He said he was my grandmother's brother. My great-uncle, technically. He said my grandmother, my father's mother, a woman I had never once met, had been trying to find me for over 3 years, and that she had recently been diagnosed with a serious illness, and that she had asked him to find me before it was too late. I stared at him. My grandmother is dead. My father told me she died before I was born. He looked at me for a long moment. I know what your father told you, he said. He slid a phone across the table. On the screen was a photograph. An older black woman, maybe 70, sitting in a garden somewhere warm. She was looking at the camera with this expression I can only describe as tired and determined at the same time. Around her neck was a small gold cross. Her name is Loretta, he said, and she's been looking for you since the day your father cut off contact. I don't know how long I sat there. Rose made a small sound in her carrier and I put my hand on her back automatically, the way you do when you're a mother, even when your whole world is coming apart around you. I had about 100 reasons not to trust this man. I also had nothing left to lose. I asked him to give me 1 hour. I used a library computer to verify what I could: his name, a connection to my family, a legal notice from a county in Georgia that matched details he'd given me. It wasn't conclusive, but the photograph, something about the photograph. Something about the photograph. I called the number he'd written on a napkin. She picked up on the second ring. She didn't say hello. She said, "Hannah, baby, I have been looking for you for so long." And I started crying right there in the library, ugly crying. The kind where you can't make words, and the librarian pretended not to notice, and Rose just looked up at me from her carrier with these wide, serious eyes, like she was trying to figure out if this was something to be scared of or something good. I still don't know how to explain what happened in the next 24 hours. Franklin drove us to a Marriott, not a motel, a hotel, with key cards in a lobby and a man at the front desk who said, "Welcome back," to Franklin like he'd been there before. He booked 2 rooms. I gave Rose a real bath in a real tub for the first time in weeks. I sat on the edge of the bed afterward with her in a clean onesie, and I put my face in my hands and I just breathed. In the morning, we flew to Savannah. My grandmother, Loretta, I was still getting used to saying her name, still getting used to the fact that she existed, was everything my father had never told me about. She lived in a house outside Savannah, on a property that had been in her family for decades. Not a mansion, I want to be clear about that. It was a large, beautiful house with a wraparound porch and old oak trees and a garden that she'd clearly been tending for years. She made sweet tea. She called Rose baby girl from the moment she saw her. She held my daughter against her chest and closed her eyes, and when she opened them, they were wet. She told me the truth about my father over the next few days, in pieces, the way you do when something is painful and complicated and you've been carrying it alone for a very long time. My grandfather, her husband, had built a successful real estate investment business over 30 years. When he passed, he left the majority of his estate to my grandmother, with provisions for their children. My father was supposed to receive a portion, but my grandfather had a condition in the will. My father had to maintain contact with my grandmother, had to include her in his life. It was his way of trying to hold the family together even after he was gone. My father refused. He'd been estranged from my grandmother for reasons I still don't fully understand. Some argument, some old wound that had calcified over decades into something neither of them would bend on. Rather than reconcile, rather than admit the estrangement to me or explain it, he simply told me she was dead. He told me I had no paternal grandmother. He erased her completely, rather than admit he'd chosen pride over his own mother. He forfeited his inheritance, and he made sure I grew up not knowing she existed. I sat with that for a long time. I'm still sitting with it, honestly. What I can tell you is that Loretta was not a perfect woman. She admitted that freely. She said she'd made mistakes with my father when he was young, that there were things she wished she'd done differently, that the estrangement had not been entirely his fault, but she had spent years trying to repair it. She'd hired people to find me. She'd written letters to addresses she thought might reach my father. None of it worked. When she got her diagnosis, a serious heart condition, manageable but serious, she made it the non-negotiable priority of whatever time she had left. She found me sleeping under a bridge with my 7-month-old daughter. If I let myself think about how close she came to not finding me at all, I have to stop and breathe slowly for a while. The first weeks in Savannah were an adjustment. I won't pretend it was all warmth and healing, because it wasn't. There were hard conversations. There were moments when I didn't know how to act, when I felt simultaneously grateful and furious and ashamed and relieved in ways that didn't make sense together. Loretta was patient. She gave me space when I needed it, and she showed up when I needed that instead. She had a lawyer, her own attorney, a woman named, well, I'll just call her the attorney, who helped me navigate the child support case. She had connections, resources, experience with exactly the kind of contractor arrangement dodge that Owen had pulled. Within 6 weeks, Owen had a judgment against him. His wages were being garnished. It wasn't a lot, but it was consistent, and it was legally binding, and there was something deeply satisfying about watching the system actually work when you had someone in your corner who knew how to make it work. I got Rose a proper pediatrician. I got myself a therapist. I enrolled in an online program to finish the business degree I'd abandoned when I got married. And slowly, over months and then years, something started to take shape. Loretta had investments, properties, a portfolio that her attorney helped her manage. She'd been doing it herself for years, but her health made it harder. She started asking me to sit in on meetings. At first, I just listened. Then I started asking questions. Then I started understanding the answers. She had a gift for explaining financial concepts in plain language. She said her husband had always made everything complicated to keep her dependent, and she'd made a point of learning it all herself after he was gone. She passed that on to me like it was something she'd been saving. 4 years after I flew to Savannah with nothing but a diaper bag and $600 in cash, I was managing a significant portion of her rental property portfolio. Not because she handed it to me, because she taught me, tested me, let me fail at small things so I wouldn't fail at big ones. I got my degree. I got a real estate license. 2 years after that, I co-founded a small property management firm with a woman I'd met through one of Loretta's contacts, a veteran of the industry who wanted a partner with fresh energy, and I wanted someone with 30 years of experience. We split it 50-50. We now manage 43 properties across 3 counties. I tell you all of this not to make it sound like a fairy tale. There was nothing fairy tale about it. I was exhausted for years. I second-guessed myself constantly. I had panic attacks in parking lots. I called Loretta crying at 11 o'clock at night more times than I can count, and she always picked up, and she always said the same thing. You've done hard things before. Do the next hard thing. What I want to tell you is what happened the day I finally told my father. I didn't seek it out. He called me out of nowhere, 2 years after I'd moved to Savannah. Probably because someone had told him something, or maybe he'd seen something online. He called my old number, which I still had. I saw his name on the screen and I stood in Loretta's garden with Rose running around between the oak trees chasing a cat she'd named Biscuit, and I let it ring 3 times before I picked up. He wanted to know where I was. He wanted to know why I hadn't called. He said, and I want to be precise here, he said, I heard you've been in contact with some people you shouldn't be talking to. I said, you mean your mother? The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. I told him, very calmly, where I was. I told him that his mother had found me sleeping under an overpass with his granddaughter. I told him about the 6-week wait list at the shelter, and the borrowed phone, and the church parking lot. I told him that while his mother had been searching for me for years, he had told me she was dead. He started to explain. I let him talk for a little while. Then I said, I lost my parents the day you let Owen change that lock and didn't answer your phone. He said that wasn't fair. I said, Rose is doing great, by the way. She's about to turn 3. She has her great-grandmother's eyes. I hung up. I don't have a lot of feelings about my father these days. That's not bitterness. It's more like distance. It's more like distance. Like a place I used to live that I don't need to go back to. My mother sent a card last Christmas. I sent one back. That's where we are. But Loretta is a different story. Last spring we had a party in her garden. Nothing formal. She specifically said no to formal. Neighbors, friends, a few of her longtime clients, the attorney who'd helped with Owen's case. Rose, who is 4 now, wore a yellow dress and spent the entire afternoon trying to teach Biscuit the cat to sit, which was not going well. Loretta stood on the porch and gave a little speech. She thanked people for coming. She talked about her husband, about the years she'd spent building something she was proud of. And then she said something I wasn't expecting. She said, I want to introduce you all to my granddaughter. She found her way back to me in a way I'll never stop being grateful for. She came to me with nothing but a baby on her hip and more fight in her than most people twice her age. Everything I have is going to be in good hands. I was standing in the garden holding a glass of sweet tea, and I had to look up at the sky for a second so I wouldn't start crying in front of 40 people. Rose came and grabbed my leg the way she does, face tipped up, asking me something about the cat. I picked her up. She's heavy now. 4-year-olds are surprisingly heavy. And I held her on my hip and watched Loretta laugh at something someone said. And I thought about that night in November when I stood on a porch in the rain watching a deadbolt turn. I thought about how close I came to giving up. I thought about Miss June and her propane heater, and the way she shared it without being asked. I thought about a librarian who pretended not to see me crying. I thought about a woman who spent 3 years and whatever it cost to hire people to find a granddaughter her son had told her didn't exist. Sometimes the people who choose you are more your family than the people who made you. I know that's not a new idea, but there's a difference between knowing something and living inside it, and I have lived inside it now long enough to know it's true. Rose tapped my face with her hand. She does this when she wants my full attention, and said, "Mama, Biscuit runned away." I looked at her. My daughter. 4 years old, yellow dress, a little bit of sweet tea on her chin. Her great-grandmother's eyes, which are also my eyes, which are eyes that belong to a line of women who apparently do not quit. "Then we'll find him," I said. And we went to look. I've thought a lot about why things happened the way they did. Not in a mystical way. I'm not someone who believes the universe was arranging things on my behalf, but I do believe that the choices people make have weight, they accumulate, and eventually they land somewhere. My father made a choice decades before I was born. He chose pride over his mother. He chose to protect that choice by erasing her completely from his life, from mine, from any version of reality I was allowed to know. That's not a small thing. That's a kind of quiet cruelty that compounds silently for years, and the people who pay for it are never the ones who made the decision. I paid for it. Rose paid for it. Loretta paid for it every single day she spent looking for a granddaughter she'd never met. Owen made choices too, smaller ones that built into something that destroyed what we had. He chose to lie, then to leave, then to make sure leaving was as hard on us as possible. I used to feel rage about that. Pure, physical rage. Now I mostly feel like he was someone who never had to face what his choices cost other people, and that kind of person tends to keep making the same choices until something finally stops them. The garnishment stopped him. Not me, the system, doing what it was supposed to do when someone helped me work it properly. Here's what I actually believe. Having lived through this, character is not what you claim to be. It's what you do when it's inconvenient to be good. Loretta could have given up, hiring investigators, following cold leads, dealing with a son who'd cut off contact. None of that was easy or cheap or emotionally simple. She did it anyway for years because she had decided that the right thing was worth doing even when it yielded nothing. That's not a personality trait. That's a decision she made, repeatedly, under circumstances that would have justified giving up. I think about that when things get hard now, and things still get hard. Running a business is hard. Co-parenting from a distance with someone you no longer trust is hard. Building something real from scratch when you started with nothing is genuinely, grindingly hard. But I have a standard to measure myself against now. I have a 70-year-old woman who called investigators and waited and called again, and waited more and kept going until she found her family under a bridge in the rain. If she could do that, I can make the next difficult phone call. I can sit with the uncomfortable thing instead of avoiding it. I can do the next hard thing. Rose is 4 now. She doesn't know most of this story yet. Someday I'll tell her, not to make her angry at the people who failed us, but because I want her to understand something true about the world, that the people who shape your life most profoundly are not always the ones who were supposed to. Sometimes it's a great-grandmother you didn't know existed. Sometimes it's a woman under a bridge who shares a propane heater without being asked. Sometimes it's a librarian who looks away while you cry. Pay attention to those people. And when you have the chance, be one of them.